Hi, I'm Jonathan Otero, and welcome to Leading During Crisis. In this series, we're going to be talking to IT leaders and local leaders in our community that are really doing a great job at leading their teams during this pandemic. And on this episode, I'm joined by a special guest, David Robinson from DSM. And I really want to get his insight and take on what's going on with his company. So just so you guys know, David serves as the founder and president and actually CEO as well at DSM. Through his visionary leadership, DSM has evolved over its 32 years into an industry trailblazer that it's known as today. David is also known for having incubated 13 tech startups, which I don't think a lot of people know. And he's now happy to be growing the mothership, which is DSM out in Lakeland, Florida. As a hybrid managed cloud provider, he's guiding this organization on their cloud journey. And one of the greatest things is their tagline, which is the safest path to the cloud. So he's shaping a whole new future for organizations. And I want to bring David in right now and introduce him to you guys. So David, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you today, Jonathan?
Thank you for participating and joining in this series. And I think it's going to create and add a lot of value to a lot of folks who not only follow me, but just are in our same industry and in our community as well. So thank you very much.
Look forward to the discussion.
And let me ask you this question. I know from doing business with you, I know that you're sitting in your conference room there in Lakeland, right? Because I can see the board in the back. And if I know exactly where you're sitting, if you tilt your camera a little bit for the Star Wars fans that are following me, maybe you might want to see what you got there. Look at that. I mean, that is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Talk to me about that.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Life-size replica of Darth Vader, 7 foot tall. It's one of 500 made by Lucasfilms. It's the actual costume department for Lucasfilms created 500 of those for the Empire Strikes Back movie. And we have that, as well as, and I can show you this, we have a stormtrooper that's a little shorter than most stormtroopers. And that's because that was when Luke Skywalker was wearing a stormtrooper outfit. So have kind of two unique pieces of memorabilia from Star Wars. As Crown Castle has been a proud sponsor in the past, we have for the latest incarnation of the Star Wars films, we brought these statues to the movie theater to have people take their pictures with them and donate to great causes like United Way and other charitable causes in our community. So happy to be a Star Wars fan, and I'm glad you remember those.
That's awesome. And I definitely had fun at that last event that you guys put on. So very, very cool. And I think a lot of the people that follow me will enjoy that. So definitely a great icebreaker when you're having a meeting in that conference room. So awesome stuff, David. So let me ask you a question. So,
you've got the good force and the bad force.
Yeah, exactly. So David, as you know, the reason why I created this series and this podcast is I wanted to hear, I engage with a lot of different IT, folks every day, your peers and people in IT on a daily basis. And I'm hearing that a lot of these organizations are within they fall within 3 buckets. They're either the dust has settled and they're moving forward with some innovative and creative ideas. And I want to share those ideas with folks, or they're in the second bucket where they're kind of start in a pause mode. And they're stopping everything for right now. They were good before the pandemic, and now they're just kind of, let's just pause right now. But third, they're in the worst bucket. That's where they're kind of in panic mode, full blown panic mode, where they're people are being let go and furloughed, and so they're nervous. And you have these creative people with wonderful ideas, but they're just kind of in a panic mode where they're stuck and they can't move forward. And that's the worst place to be in. So I wanted to share ideas with people that I know that are leading from the front. And so I appreciate you joining with this series, because I'm curious to know your take from where you sit as the CEO of DSM. I'm curious to know, maybe we can start off by, I want to know from your perspective, what do you think, tell me what were the top most important things that you guys implemented from when the start of the pandemic hit and you guys had to shut down. what did you guys do right away? Because obviously I'm sure there was some scrambling going on. And how did you implement those ideas to get DSM back afloat?
Yep. So as you know, we're in the cloud business and also the disaster recovery business continuity business. So, we again tried to lead from the front of the pack and showed our customers how we responded to the crisis by giving, our employees and staff that ability if they needed to work from home and they felt safer at home to start working from home long before the quarantine actually started. So we wanted to make sure all our technology scaled appropriately, for remote work. We had not actually worked 100% remote before, but as we tested that and we went through that process, we proved that we could do that using technology like Teams and Zoom and other technologies that we use internally to communicate. The challenge has been, quite frankly, the number of channels you can communicate on, not too few a channels that you have, and so finding the appropriate channel for the right audience is always interesting. The problem with a pandemic like we've just experienced, Jonathan, is all that FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so one of the things we did to again lead from the front is explain things, what we were doing, why we were doing, being very transparent about our motivations, keeping our employees safe, keeping our clients safe, and how we were going to react through each stage of this process. A pandemic does not equal panic. And often you're right, people find themselves in that they're either in paralysis or they're in panic mode and they can't move forward. And we saw a lot more people like that in the beginning of the pandemic and the beginning of the quarantine than we do now. We see people kind of coming out of it, exiting. Some people are a little bit nervous with some of the resurgence of the numbers and stuff like that. Fact of the matter is, this nasty virus that's out there that some liken to the flu, some say it's much, much worse, is a nasty virus. And ultimately, CDC estimates 70 to 80% of us are going to get it. And so it's up to us to, control when we get it as much as possible, but realize that it is an inevitability and life is going to go on. We're not going to go back to living in caves. It's, not 2008 all again. And even the numbers today, the economic numbers today, they show that our unemployment's actually better than what we anticipated. And, yes, I'm an internal optimist, but I'm also a realist. And I realize that, life has to go on and you can't be in the paralysis bucket. You have to look at how you win through the turns. DSM has always looked at turns in the economy, turns and changes. And that's when, people say, oh, new normal. It's not really new normal. It's emerging times. Changes are happening that allow you to win in those turns. If you think of sporting events, I know some of us remember from, last year what sporting events were. Sportsmen win through the turns. You think about swimmers, you think about motorcycle racers, you think about car racers. They don't win in the straightaways typically, they win the turns. It is in businesses, win through the turns. If you don't win through the turns, you essentially become the dinosaur and
Right.
you go that way, extinction.
Right. And you bring up a great point, because I think for the modern CEO, right, or the modern C-level executive like yourself, all these tech changes, they present challenges, but they also can present some opportunities. I think you would agree with that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
As technology starts to play more of an increasing role with everyone working from home, as you said, which I think is a great point, I think that's where, we start to excel in our industry. But I'm curious to know, I know that, I want to know how you guys are anticipating, knowing DSM and their business model. I've visited your data center in Winter Haven. How do you anticipate that businesses are going to is there a market demand for data center or replication and things like that post-COVID? I mean, I would imagine so, but what do you think?
Well, what people have found out during this pandemic is technology is more important today than it ever has been. If you think about the last 3 months that we've just endured, how many times you might have used Instacart or Amazon or any number of online ordering applications and websites for food, for takeout and stuff like that. it has completely changed the way we can do business. If you think 20 years ago, most of those services were in their infancy. And if we'd had this type of pandemic, people didn't know another way to get groceries. People really didn't have another way to do takeout. Pizza was the only thing that really delivered. Now with Uber Eats, you've got everything that delivers. So I think everyone realizes that technology is not going away. It's here to stay, and technology has been that game changer that's made this pandemic much more endurable, and allowed us as a country and as a global population to move forward. So will coming out of COVID-19, when this new economy emerges and so on, business resilience and business continuity and disaster recovery are going to be more important than ever, because people realize without their technology, they can't survive. When we think about that, that really parlays right into security. What's really changed in the security aspect, since COVID, with everyone working at home. Think about if the normal attack surface is every business, and let's say there's 1,000 businesses in a particular area, so you have 1,000 attack surfaces that the bad guys can go after. But when you have 1,000 businesses that each have an average of 100 remote workers, suddenly you have 100,000 attack surfaces. And it's actually even more than that. I'm using small numbers for just to get scale. And you think about that, the number of attack surfaces that the bad guys have to go after is really going to be creating havoc, I think, for us over the next several months. We've already seen it. We've seen clients hit with ransomware. We've seen clients hit with targeted phishing and things like that. And we have to answer the question of not if something happens, or a bad thing happens, COVID-19 happens, hurricane. That's what we used to think about in Florida as the bad thing that could happen. Now we think about a ransomware attack, a denial of service attack, and we have to stay in business. And in order to have true business resilience, you've got to have digital resilience. So I think they're probably more important today than ever.
Sure. So you touched on something there that's really critical, right? We talked about cybersecurity, and there's a lot of trends in our industry, right? It seems to be trendy. And one of the things, we talk about like AI and IoT, and we talk about data replication, DRAS, but cybersecurity is been something we had our ransomware events prior to COVID, and so that was a big topic where people really are into it. But now more than ever, with everyone working from home, we have to worry about that. So would you say that cybersecurity, and I mean, based on what your answer is, probably yes, but I'm curious to know, what do you think is the biggest trend right now for enterprise accounts? Is it cybersecurity?
I think it's cybersecurity, but it's also, how do I get my workloads to the cloud? What's that path for me to get my workloads that are sitting in an office right now that I don't have people that can access that? How do I get that into the cloud effectively so that everyone can access those resources kind of equally? And I think people are also, from a security perspective, realizing that just because something's on-prem doesn't make it safer. That you can protect your assets in the cloud just as well as you can on-prem, if they are truly connected. And so that's the trend, and that's where it's great having partners like Crown Castle that have the bandwidth, that have the direct pipes to various cloud providers, direct express connections and stuff like that. That helps them be more transparent, be less latency, and be operating just as if they were working from their office.
Gotcha. So I'm curious to know, David, from your perspective, right? We talked about the IT side and the technical part of it. Talk to me about the business side of it now for a second. Let's pivot to that, because now that we're 3-4 months into this thing now, I've lost track already at this point.
3 years? Is it 3 years? I think
it feels like it, right? It's crazy, right? So now that we're that long into it, I mean, I'm sure that there's pressure. There's, at least from what I'm seeing, there's pressure from customers with 3 big challenges that they're facing. So one is reducing or eliminating, technical debt. The second one is increasing agility, business agility, and having a competitive advantage, right? Because that's always critical from our competition. And the third one is how do they adapt new technology trends faster, right? Some of them that we spoke about with cybersecurity and those things. In your opinion, from the business aspect of it, which of these three is most important to DSM right now?
DSM is a company or DSM's clients?
Let's talk about the clients.
So our clients, some of them are we have a lot of state government clients. We have a local government as well. And we have a lot of commercial clients. So they're all in a little bit different place. But I would say the majority of them are coming out of the panic and pause phase and going into the what else can we do phase. And we found that this is a great time to implement some of the things that they may not have implemented, just to reduce their attack surface, to reduce their vulnerabilities, like, for instance, two-factor authentication. Great time to get that out there, get that rolled out there, especially for your admins. We've done some of that stuff internally where we've, re-architected a few things to reduce kind of our technical debt, and built things the right way. So we've, the time that people save commuting, going back and forth to the office, has actually created an opportunity for people to work on projects they weren't able to work on in the past. And because we don't have the ability to socially interact at sporting events and concerts and things like that, you find a lot of people spending a lot more time, quote, at work remote than they were when they were at work and their life was going 100 million miles an hour. So a lot of opportunities, I think, to reduce, that technical debt. Also, that ability to ideate and look at how they went through the turns and how they better leverage technology. I think, I've seen it by restaurants here. There are some restaurants that absolutely closed down. I feel bad for those guys. There are some restaurants that realized our future is takeout, and we're going to get takeout really right. And wow, they've thrived,
Right.
and I know some that have done actually higher sales volume, during COVID-19 than they did, prior, which is
Sure.
great to see companies actually prospering in bad times. That's what winning through the turns is.
That's all you see, and I appreciate you saying that, David, because that's exactly what this whole series is all about, right? Leading during crisis. How do we innovate? How do we create? And how do we share those ideas? And so I appreciate you saying that because I think that's critical. Sometimes it's good to hear a different voice say it, so I'm glad that you said it. And I think look, at the end of the day, whatever level you're in, right? Even from a personal perspective, you're dealing with this as well, right? Just like everyone else. Even though you're the leader of the organization, you're still going through it, and you're having to deal with all these challenges and issues. And but at the same time, the difference is you have to keep the company afloat, right? And
Right.
so you mentioned remote work from home, right? We spoke about that. You mentioned that a couple times here already. So you talked about how that increases efficiency, and I can tell you, from me personally, working from home, I haven't worked as much than it is from working from home, because I'm always on the computer, especially now during these days. But I read a study on LinkedIn that talked about they polled employees from different different jobs, and they said the majority of the folks really feel that they can work remote and work from home and be more efficient. Do you agree with that?
So I would say 99% of my workforce would also agree with that.
Uh-huh.
I'm that 1% exception in that I actually prefer being in the office. And, I don't know what psychologically, I'm not typically old school on a lot of things, but this is one of those things where, I like to separate my personal life and my business life. And even though I'm technically available, via communication, my iPhone or iPad or something at home, I really focus on work, and then I really try and focus on family once I leave the car in the driveway and in the garage, But right up until that point, when I leave the house and I return to the house, I'm all business. And so, the kids call it my work mode. Oh, Dad's in work mode. Watch out.
Mhm.
And it is difficult for me because I'm so steeped in keeping my life bifurcated, that way that even through the pandemic, even though there'd be no one in the office, I came to my office. I like my setup. I like my
Mhm.
large monitor. I like working
Mhm.
right there. I like the chair I have. I'm in work mode. And then when I leave, I kind of turn it off and go home. So
Right.
for me, it didn't work as well, but for the majority and 99% of our staff, it worked just fine.
Yeah, and I think I agree because for me being in a sales role, my whole thing is I have to be in front of you, right? And that's the reason why I'm doing
Hmm.
all these videos. I have to be in front of you because I need to develop that relationship. It's hard to do it over the phone or a Zoom meeting or whatever.
Hmm.
And so for me, it's been a challenge. But like you said, and that's why I love that you joined me and participated in this because you know seeing all my clients and watching directly how they've been impacted, it's been an inspiration to see how folks lead from the front and how they keep their teams engaged and supported. And so it's interesting to get that take on that. So what I want to ask you, David, as we start to kind of wrap this up, I'm curious to know, with that being said, one of I think the biggest challenge from your level is, how do we continue to support and engage the team? How do other CEOs who are watching this video or other IT professionals continue to support and engage their team and foster innovation and keep the lights on at the same time? What do you think?
Yeah. No, it's an interesting balance. I think that, what I call theta time, that time to think, is very important. Some people actually do it during their commute. Other people, would listen to an audiobook or something like that. I think you absolutely have to foster those things with create a culture that fosters innovation. And in order to do that, you have to adapt to the changing times. Some of the things that we have seen, as our clients do is very quickly implement teams, get teams working, very quickly start being much more comfortable with Zoom meetings. One of the things I talk to my team about is practice being on video because that's like being there. And for the short term next few months, there's going to be a lot more videos than ever before. It gets a little bit old. I'm old school like you. I prefer to have an in-person meeting or be able to have lunch or a breakfast or a coffee or something with someone. But you have to adapt. Otherwise, you become the way of the dinosaur. So
Mhm.
I think, again, leading from the front, leading by example, and then finding things inside your organization that are innovative, that have changed, that are changing your organization and highlighting those and promoting that culture of innovation. Now, innovation does not always mean success. You
Mhm.
can innovate and you can fail. And if you're going to fail quickly,
Mhm.
realize it, and realize that failure is part of that innovation strategy and part
Mhm.
of that way of moving forward.
Yep. Yep. If you're gonna fail, fail fast. I'd rather know now than have to wait 3 months from now. And I really think you hit the mark on some of the things you said. And my whole goal of this is hopefully we can create some value to some folks that are in the IT community that are suffering right now. And so I think that with the ideas that you brought and some of the ways that you've handled those challenges, hopefully they can gain some inspiration from that. And if they are afraid to take the next step and if they feel like they're being that dinosaur, like you said, they need to make that change because otherwise they're going to get left behind. So I really
Well,
appreciate it.
well, Jonathan, right now, IT leaders around the world have the opportunity to create dividends, huge dividends for their countries, for their companies, versus taxes. A lot of organizations have always seen IT as, that's that tax. They're always, maybe they're late with their projects, maybe they're over budget with their projects. They cost so much, and this is the opportunity for us all to band together and say, okay, where does the organization need to go? What technology is going to help get us there, and how do we get it there most efficiently? So when I say eliminate technical debt, that's one of the things you can do where you can kind of polish the apple. But there's also things that where technology will help your company, win through the curves, and if or win through the turns. And if you can really focus on that and bring that value back, you have the opportunity to change the paradigm, and people see you as what digital should be and what the IT infrastructure should be is a huge asset. And I would say IT is the most underappreciated asset in most organizations. And this is the opportunity to work with partners such as Crown Castle, such as DSM, to find that value, unleash that value, and help your company win through the turn.
Well, David, the proverbial drop the mic, right? Because that's it. That's the way to end it, because that is perfectly well said. So I just want to say thank you very much for sharing. Thank you very much for participating. I think this created a ton of value, definitely even for me, to hear it from, the horse's mouth, hear it from the person that's leading from the front and innovating from the front. So thank you so much for that. I'm looking forward to seeing what DSM continues to do in the future. And I really appreciate you joining me. So thank you very much.
And may the force be with you.
Yeah. May the force be with you.
it.
Take care, David. Good talking to you,
Take
sir.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.